would like to call the 243rd meeting of the EEPC to order. The time is 10:39 a.m. First item is approval of our meeting minutes from September 24th. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve them.
On a second?
Also, Angie.
Thanks, Angie. All in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions. Thanks, Commissioner Cabrera. No abstentions, and we'll note that Commissioner Rice is not here, so that is to be marked absent for this vote. The next item on the agenda is old business. We'll turn it over to the team to go through the controller's audit response.
Okay, so I just want to report that the comptroller this is their typical request for a response to the audit. They've requested a response by November 19th, even though we've already given them a response. So I will be preparing that response and sending it to the commission for review prior to that date. And it should be brief. We're going to get into this in a minute, but I'm happy to report that according to their formula, we've done all of the audits on our plan for this year. But I still would like to examine their formula and figure out what it is exactly we should be doing. And I'd like to point out that the formula also causes our audits to overlap our compliance monitoring period. So I will be saying this in the response, and I'll submit it to you for review before I send it to the comptroller.
Sharice, could you start with saying, and I'm not writing it for you, but there is a basic misunderstanding, whether it's deliberate or not, of how we process our audits and what they view as to how we should process our audits. And it is not their role to tell us how to manage our position or our work.
We've done that what I'm going to do pretty much is to reiterate what I said in my previous response.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying, but I was just trying to not make it as nice as you were.
Okay. You'll have a chance to review it.
Well, would that it was really Scott Stringer that was saying something, that would be one piece, but it isn't. We're dealing with middle level, for want of a better term, bureaucrats who believe they're right, and I take issue with that. I mean, having stated clearly what we are doing, and they didn't find fault with our activity, they're only finding fault with our process. That's not their role.
Mm-hmm.
True, that's true.
I mean, Sasha, am I saying anything you disagree with?
Nothing. No, I don't disagree at all. I'm wondering, and I know this has been a long-standing tension, Sharice, if you think a meeting is appropriate to have sort of a more both formal but also perhaps informal and necessary touch point with that office. I defer to you in terms of process.
I'm not sure that they would be open to a meeting. I think we can end the letter with that, saying that we would love to discuss it over a meeting or have a meeting to discuss it. I think this is more of a standard. We request your response within the next few months. I don't think it considers the fact that we already submitted a response. We actually submitted 2 responses since then. So this is something that I plan to reiterate, and I can also end, which is a good suggestion, by saying that we would be happy to have a conference to discuss it or something of that nature.
But Sharice, I think in saying that, the commissioners would be pleased to meet with you because they sense there's a misunderstanding as to our process, and they find it difficult to comprehend why when we are doing our work, wherein our work product is not the problem, and the process is why they are having this problem. And something that says, hey guys, it's not just Sharice. but it's the commissioners themselves that are having a problem with what you've been doing.
Okay,
I mean, you know, and you know, at the end of the day, we'd be happy to meet with Scott.
Right.
I think we should request a meeting. I feel like the letter correspondence is important and sort of codifies our clear perspective, but I think this issue is longstanding and as you've shared with us, this isn't the first time that there's been a misalignment in terms of our processes.
would you like me to request the meeting and not do an explanation, or add the meeting to the response?
Yeah, I sort of defer to you and the other commissioners on process. I do think a written and prompt response to demonstrate our like continued response, the issue at hand seriously, feels important to have on the record.
Okay.
But I defer to you and to the commissioners on that.
Okay, that's
You know,
fine.
I do think it should be a written response, and I think at the base, at the bottom part of the response, that we really feel strongly and want a meeting on this issue of process, and if necessary, would meet with the controller himself.
Agreed.
Okay,
And I think the meeting will never happen
Why do you say that?
because I'm a betting person, and it's a middle level bureaucrat that doesn't want her boss or his boss to know what the devil they're doing. That's why.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this item before we move on? And Sharice, Jen, Letizia, do you have what you need for this?
you're fine. Mhm. What is that?
I have no idea.
I don't know either, but it's knocking on mine. Is somebody typing? It's gone.
It appears to be over. Let's carry on into the agenda and hope that that lasts. Okay, I'm going to go to item number 4, audit update. Item A, status of sexual harassment prevention and response practices audits. Sharice and or Jen.
Okay, so in terms of the audit plan, I am excited to say that 100% of the entities on the audit plan have been issued preliminary determinations, and 94% have been issued final determinations.
Can I clap now?
Please do. So I'm in the process of making an abbreviated new audit that we will roll out next year, in addition to wrapping up the sexual harassment audit. And I will run that by the commissioners at the next meeting, along with the audit plan for the entities that will be on. I'll probably present a 4-year audit plan at the next meeting.
Okay. Therese, I have an idea which we have never discussed before, so I apologize for interrupting. But since sexual harassment audit started because of what was happening in the outside world, and since we will have completed them, could we do a letter to the city council, to Helen, essentially saying, not that we followed her lead, but coincidentally, at the same time she was undertaking to pass the legislation, we had undertaken these audits, and this is the final result of that search. And just and send a copy of that to Corey Johnson as well. It's just, in some sense, political, clearly, but also I think it would be another way of the city council understanding that the EEPC is separate and apart from them, undertakes its own actions, and really sort of separates us out from the legislation. It just underscores that we too were looking at what was happening outside in the world, and we too were reacting separately and apart on behalf of the city employees. I obviously I'm not writing the letter, but it just seems to me the kind of thing that can't do it. It can't hurt, and it may help.
It's a great idea. We can do it. We would have to wait until we're done with the sexual harassment audit, which would be in 2021. But it's a great idea to wrap up that specific audit. Maybe we should do it for every audit type when it's complete.
It is conceivable, and maybe that should be a letter to not only the city council, but to the mayor.
Right.
So each
Good
time,
idea.
each time you do it, you tell the other two political leaders, and maybe you copy the public advocate as well, as long as we're looking at
Yes.
the elected officers for the city who.
Not the comptroller.
No, but
Right.
But I'm just looking at the entities that have that responsibility purportedly.
Okay. And
Sounds like a good idea.
Well, you might want to do a note in some manner. Just make sure that there's a note to file for executive directors to follow up on it.
right.
Agreed.
Okay.
Let me also point out that we will be on the agencies that have been issued final determinations and preliminary determinations will now be undergoing compliance monitoring for pretty much the balance of the year. We can't really control the pace of when those agencies will complete their corrective actions.
No, I understand. I was just, because you're coming to closure, it just seems to me that when you reach closure, this should just be an added thing that we didn't normally do, but we should do this, certainly in this situation, which is sexual harassment. And I accept you're saying, why don't we do it all the time? And why don't we do it all the time?
Right.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that suggestion. Can we move on to item 2? Final determination votes. Okay, so we have a number of resolutions to vote on today, 2020 final determination resolutions, 6 in total. I'll read them out and then we can go to a vote. Number 1, Resolution 2020 AP 243 469 2020 LaGuardia Community College. Number 2, Resolution 2020 AP 243 868 2020 Department of Citywide Administrative Services. I also want to make sure that number 2, it's administrative, not administration. I could be wrong. I'll carry on reading and you all can clarify.
Administrative.
Administrative.
Number 3, Resolution 2020 EP 243 906 2020 Office of the Special Narcotics Prosecutor. Resolution 2020 AP 243 902 2020 Office of the Bronx County District Attorney. Number 5, Resolution 2020 AP 243 462 2020 Gutman Community College. And number 6, Resolution 2020 AP 243 905 2020 Office of the Richmond County District Attorney. Can we have a motion, please?
I move to approve all of the above named motions.
Thank you. And a second?
Angela,
Commissioner Cabrera, are you able to offer a second? Angela, are you still?
Is she still?
Hello?
Hi, Angela, can you offer a second?
Yeah, I just interested in the letter. Will we get a copy of the letter you're going to send?
Yes, and we've moved on to voting on the resolutions. And we just took a vote where Commissioner Reese moved to approve 6 resolutions. Can you offer a second?
I didn't understand what you said. I'm sorry.
No problem. We're voting for 6 resolutions and Elaine just moved to approve.
Okay.
Can you second for the record?
Mhm.
Great. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Thank you. No abstentions. And again, for the record, Commissioner Rice is not at today's meeting. Before we adjourn, the last item on the agenda, compliance update, status of 2020 audit plan compliance monitoring.
Jen?
Yep, I had to unmute myself. Going back to the agenda item, that was a typographical error on my part, but the resolution does accurately say administrative services. So sorry for any confusion. As Sharice was mentioning, we have all but 2 of our agencies in compliance monitoring or done with compliance monitoring for the 2020 audit plan. The last 2 I anticipate will also be in compliance monitoring by our next meeting. At this point, we have 30 agencies in compliance monitoring, but half of them have 5 or less corrective actions. So it is very realistic that we can wrap them up before the end of the year. That's not to say that the others can't be wrapped up, but those are very likely to be wrapped up because it's not much left for them to take care of before they'll be in compliance with our standards. So hopefully we can get that moving, and by the next meeting and the end of the year, have more compliance in for you.
Thank you. I can applaud again if anybody wants to hear me.
Thank you for the incredible work.
It's been a very it's more a laborious process because we're in the office some days, we're not in the office, and we have to use systems, and it's not as seamless as it normally would be. So I am actually quite impressed with the ability of the team to get as many out. And the last 2, believe it or not, are with our newest analyst who only started in like May. So considering all things considered, we are very much on good track.
Right. And I think we've been doing really well considering the fact that we had to set up
Yeah.
the entire process to figure out how to do this line to begin with. And we did it at a shotgun pace, I guess, in March when the orders came down to shelter in place. And then, you know, I'm impressed with everything that we've done.
So much.
I really am.
So are we. So are we.
And we've even, like I said, we've even had to or like Jen said, we've even had to onboard employees at home. And actually, the employee that we onboarded is doing really well, considering that she hasn't really, I don't think I've met her in person.
I think she's only been into the office maybe 4 or 5 times. But she's, like I said, she only has 2 more final determinations to issue. And she did her entire onboarding online. So I have to give kudos to both our co-managers and HR and her for really kind of being outside of the norm and making the most of it. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, it may well be that that as long as you don't have people that are so technological inept, you are in a better situation. It's growing up with it. You know how to use it, and people like me have to learn how to use it. As a result, we are not doing as well as we might be. So youth has its advantages sometimes.
Well, overall, the team is doing fantastic. Our 2 new analysts are doing well, and I'm really proud of their progress.
Good
Yes.
luck. Good.
Congrats, everyone. That's
Thanks, Jen.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Any other updates on audit plan compliance monitoring or any other items before we adjourn?
I think Letizia is on the line, so if Letizia wants to give us a brief update of our discussions. We recently had discussions around local 15 and the portion that requires EPC to ensure that or ascertain whether or not the city of New York's municipal workforce reflects the diversity of the city of New York. So we've been figuring out ways to do that using the United States Census. And I think Letizia can briefly touch on that if she's on the line.
Can I interrupt for a minute? The local law we're talking about doesn't require us to do anything or to report anything until 2022, correct?
2021.
February of 2021. Oh, so it cannot wait for the new census. Got it. Okay. That was my question. You're based on the 10-year-old census.
Oh.
Right, but the American Community Survey is a part of the census that's conducted more frequently than the actual big 10-year portion of the census or the overall census. So Leticia can elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. So part of Local Law 13 dictates that we actually look at the categories that we're currently using to identify the workforce. So we are looking at ways to ensure that we're capturing the demographics of the city's workforce. So we're using the U.S. Census, their categories to as a first cut at assisting us in aligning our efforts. So that's our primary look. And then we're also looking at the ACS to see if there are further categories that could possibly be used for us to consider to better descriptively analyze the city's population, so workforce. So that's where we are relative to that. That's just a facet of Local Law 13 that we have to respond to. But as you know, this report, this expectation is pretty dense. And so there are a number of expectations that we have to meet. You may recall last meeting, I referenced the fact that we were supposed to get a report from MODA, and we did get that report last week. So I'm going through the process now of looking at that report to see how we can incorporate that data into our response to Local Law 13. So briefly, the report that we've received is basically a point-in-time snapshot of the city's workforce. Basically, it's looking at employees that were actively employed or on temporary leave. This is based upon the city's data as of December of 2018. So we're looking at about 180,000 employees across 36 different agencies. So that's just a snapshot. So the report highlights the U.S. EEOC, or it uses their categories to classify the employees. Also, the racial ethnic categories are in alignment with the census data. So again, I'm going to be looking at this aggregate data on pay and demographic information to see how we basically can incorporate that to our response to Local Law 13. So that's a brief.
But doesn't that mean that in order for it to make any sense at all, you need to, because that's a city workforce, you need to find the correlation into what the city, not the, not employed by the city government, but what New York City's workforce was. Aren't those two separate animals? And
so, yes.
In fact, it's totally unrealistic because Local Law 13, frozen in time, has nothing to do with what has actually happened because of COVID and all of these people. The city employees probably have a higher number continue to be in employment rather than the city of New York's workforce, not the government's workforce, where any number of people are out of work and may never be able to be rehired. So your entire hotel industry, your entire restaurant industry, and thank you very much, your Broadway and your performance industry are out of work. They're not on furlough. They've been fired.
Local Law 13 deals with city municipal workforce.
But it compares it, trying to compare it with the actual workforce as to whether or not there.
No, what it does is it calls for the EPC to look at underutilization within the city's municipal government workforce, and to ensure that the city's racial the city captures the racial categories that's within the city of New York. So when the city's collecting information on its workforce, it's collecting information that's consistent with the groups that actually live in New York. And if not, then what other groups does the EPC recommend that the city adds to its data collection tools, I guess, in terms of measuring its workforce?
So it's not looking at whether or not those people, they're not looking at the employee base outside the city, outside the government.
No, not outside of government.
Right.
Okay, got it. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Mhm, mhm,
No, that's not, no, that's why we're here, to be honest.
mhm.
So, I think our strategy of the reason why we're looking at the US Census is because if we can look at the American Community Survey, which deals with race and deals with ethnicity, race and ethnicity in the city of New York, if we can look at whether or not there are other categories that are identified as being present, then that would be a good basis to say, okay, well, the census has identified other categories. So now let's see whether those categories are within the city force.
If I was a betting person, which I'm going to be, I would, before you finish your analysis, my bet is you're going to find underutilization of Asians throughout.
Mm.
Well, we don't know that yet.
I know, but that's what I think you're going to find. Asians at this point are about 11% of the city's residents, probably more like 12 or 13%, and they are not that high in the city workforce, is my bet.
Mm.
Okay. In terms of underutilization, the method that we're using is we're looking at SEEDS data, which the Department of Citywide Administrative Services submits to us every quarter. So we're going to be using that to identify underutilization for many of the mayoral agencies. And in terms of the non-mayoral agencies, some of the non-mayorals are included in SEEDS, but there are non-mayorals that are not included. So the EPC would be collecting information from those non-mayorals and possibly aggregating agencies like, or entities like the community boards that have 3 or fewer employees, or entities like that. We may be exploring aggregating their workforce and then maybe comparing the titles and seeing utilization there. So we
Does
have
SEEDS include the district attorneys?
Yes.
Mhm.
And it has the community colleges, although not the academic institute.
No, community colleges have their own underutilization reports.
Mhm.
Which you then need to get a hold of.
Right, we would collect from whatever entities are not included in SEEDS, we would be collecting the underutilization reports directly from them. And for those entities that do not conduct their own underutilization, or that may have fewer than, let's say, 5 employees in a job, or whatever may actually skew the results, we would be dealing in figuring out how to actually, I guess, conduct a utilization analysis with
Got it.
those types of entities.
Got it.
So we're in it, and we're doing the best that we can with the staff that we have, and we're looking for meaningful ways to explore the information, or meaningful shortcuts, I should say, which is why we started with the United States Census. Local Law 13 does say that we can conduct surveys. The EPC currently does not have the manpower or the resources to conduct surveys. If we have to go that route, we would be asking the entity to conduct their own survey of their employees and to submit their methodologies, so that we can examine how they get to the conclusion. But we would be working with them and giving them guidance in the process.
Is there any way that you can work with Jewett and put together a survey monkey that just collect the data and do the questions and utilize that? I mean, it seems to me that the kind of questions you're asking are people to self-identify as to their ethnicity, and then to self-identify as to whether or not they're executive or non-executive, making it very simple.
We've discussed that, but it's the tracking. So we have no way of knowing if our employee took the survey twice, or whether or not someone can go to another computer and take the survey, that's.
Could the same way that I have to self-identify for taking my financial survey. Someone else can do it because I have been given a number and only
Mhm.
I know my number.
Right, and see, for the EPC to undertake that currently, we simply can't, we don't have the power.
No,
What
but
we
but
do
I
is
wanted
we
to
can ask
ask,
the entity to
well, I can ask you it
survey
if
their own employees.
something for them to do it centrally. So that each employee has a number and only the employee knows what their number is. And that way you know whether or not they've even answered.
I think regardless, it sounds like a huge staff undertaking that the commission currently doesn't.
For entities that are non-mayoral, they would have to have special access, or DUIT can't assign non-mayoral employees.
Got it.
So it's,
But how many of those are there in terms of it? Is it a third that are, it's probably about 10% that are non-mayoral.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry for being so late. I just want to let you know is a whole lot of back echo. So I'm going to put myself on mute, and I think anybody else who isn't speaking should put themselves on mute as well.
good suggestion. So Commissioner Reese, oh, I lost your question. What were you asking?
I was back to saying, the last part of my question was whether or not that the non-mayoral agencies, what percentage are they? And I was saying there's somewhere between 10 and 15%. You could still get the answer with a Survey Monkey. I don't know if it can be designed. The
No,
question is, can do it. Maybe it makes some sense. And I'm not, Sasha, to your staff issue, I'm not sure if all we're dealing with is data and have eliminated the ability of people to respond multiple times because there's only one articulated number, and you would know whether they either had or had not responded by that number being missing. Then we could deal with that problem. Anyway, it's another way of doing it, getting better data than having third-party data.
the non-mayorals are actually more than half of the entities that we audit.
Oh, okay, got it. Right.
In
So,
terms of portion of the workforce, though, I assume it's collectively a far smaller number of actual employees, even though.
right, it may be right,
staff.
but in terms of methodology,
Yeah, it still requires the same.
right, it may
Tracking down.
require
Mhm.
more effort, because even I can think of our compliance monitoring process and Teammate and having access to Teammate, and even that requires us to work with DUIT to have the community, I think the community colleges have to have a specific type of access. So
But I'm just talking
there
about.
are many different systems that you were saying something? I'm sorry.
I understand that. I was really talking about number of people. And to Sasha's point, I really was talking about non-mayoral being a significantly smaller percentage of employees, so that doing it for, let's say, 80% of the employees might be, it doesn't respond totally to local law 13, but gives you a more accurate response than using third-party data. Anyway, that was the reason for suggesting that you look at whether or not they can come up with something. Given that everybody's on COVID, the chances of their being able to do it probably is unrealistic. So forget the
Well, the
discussion.
thing is that, so our shortcut strategy that I'm calling it is, if we look at the census, if we look at whether or not the census has other populous groups that that the city does not consider, then we can start with sending, we also created sort of a form letter that we will, as an alternative strategy, that we can send to the agency head and say that these are the core groups that have been identified in your workforce, because they already have the workforce data. But what we want to measure is whether or not there are other groups. So if we give them a list of other groups, then that would be what they would be allowing people to identify. So I don't know. We're still toying with it, but I think that we can have the entities do it because they have their original method of collecting information to begin with. They know who's in their workforce, so it may be better for the entity to do it to collect other information. And I think they can do it faster than we would. That's my strategy. So far for our strategy. So we'll keep you posted on it.
Alrighty.
Thanks for this work. I'm looking forward to seeing the progress as it moves forward. Any other updates or additional items before we adjourn?
We should tell Arva about Melina. Arva?
But maybe we should adjourn first.
Why don't we adjourn first?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, if there are no other items, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. It's 11:14 a.m. We can pause the recording.